Listen up. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the podcast participants, and not to any participant's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. You know, for fun. So lighten up and enjoy. Oh, hello everybody. You are listening to the Soft Serve podcast, and I am your host, Sawtooth Frank. I am back from a week off on our new every other week schedule, and I hope you're here with me. And on this week's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the nonsense that's going on in the country. Going to talk about some updates in my life. And then I want to talk to you about why the middle to the end of April has been historically a horrible time in human history for tragedies to occur. And then I'm going to tell you about some concerts and movies that I saw. So that's what I have planned on the show for you this week. So we'll see you after the intro music. The Soft Serve Podcast.
You're a loser, a scumbag, lower than scum. You are a absolute zero. Lower than scum. A scumbag. Absolute zero.
Oh yeah, baby.
Lower than scum. A scumbag.
Absolute zero. Yeah, there we go. Goodbye, intro music. Yeah, well, I'm back. After taking a week off to try to relax and refresh, I'm here. And I'm feeling neither of those things. Taking a week off did absolutely nothing to help me feel more refreshed, to feel more recharged for the show. I feel exactly like I did before. I sat down here to do this and I said to myself, what am I even going to say? What am I even going to do? I have no idea. But yes, we've moved the show to every other week to give me a little more time and to feel like I'm not constantly working to promote the show and record the show. Because like I said, when I announced this move, doing a podcast is a lot of work. And if you're not making money from it and you don't want to make money from it, there's a fine balance between putting the effort in and return on investment. Now, that return on investment isn't necessarily money, but you have to be getting something out of it. And for me, that's an ongoing feeling of satisfaction. Like I'm doing something worthwhile, like I'm interested in it, like I have something to say. And so being on the constant podcast grind of a weekly show gets very tiring very quickly. So we're going to stick with the every other week schedule for now. We'll see what kind of impact it has. We'll see if I want to change that. Maybe I'll move to once a month. Maybe I'll move back to once a year. I don't know. Who knows? Not me. And if not me, who? Well, if you know, tell me. Okay? Now, what did I do in that week off? You might want to know. Absolutely nothing. I didn't think about the podcast. I didn't do any extra promotion for the podcast like I thought I might. Nothing. I didn't even think about it. So I don't know what that means. Does it mean I'm done with the podcast again? Does it mean I'm going to quit doing the show again? I don't know. It might. Who knows? I did have somebody reach out to me asking if they could be on the show, if I was still doing interviews. And I wasn't really sure how to answer them. I said I would think about it. I said I would consider it. I told them to submit a request to me through my website contact form. I haven't received that yet, so I don't know the fate of that inquiry. But it's very possible we could have a guest interview in the near future. But I don't know for sure. Okay, so I did nothing in my week off really except pay attention to what's going on the national scene, right? So this is going to be our Fate of the Nation report. Now, if you've been paying attention, you will know that over the last 2 weeks, Trump, our president, has repeatedly threatened the country of Iran with bombings and attacks, even threatened to end their civilization as we know it, never to recover. Some people have said that rhetoric like that is a war crime, that it violates the Geneva Convention. I think I agree with that. I think it's unprecedented that we have a world leader who is announcing through Truth Social and Twitter that they're going to commit genocide and wipe out one of the oldest civilizations known to humankind, which is the Iranian civilization. Every time Trump makes these pronouncements and then doesn't go through with them, oil prices rise, then they fall, then the stock markets rise, and the stock markets fall. And there are some people who have speculated that these announcements, these constant announcements to attack Iran and then not going through with them are just attempts to manipulate the stock market. And there are other people who have observed that in and around these announcements, there have been large purchases of oil futures, betting on online gambling platforms like Polymarket, for lack of a better term. They're not gambling in the sense that they're games, but people can go onto these platforms and place bets on the likelihood of certain events happening. And there have been these anonymous unknown accounts who go on to Polymarket and place these bets about attacks in Iran or peace treaties or negotiations that are yielding millions upon millions of dollars in returns. Some have speculated that this information could only come from an inside source. Now, I'm not saying this. There's been other people out there on podcasts and on the internet who are speculating that these anonymous people could be, I don't know for sure, but they might be, again, I don't know, people associated with Trump, maybe even Trump himself. Who knows? I don't. This is just what people are speculating out there on the interwebs. And another thing that's been happening as a result of all of this war activity in the Middle East and Iran is that oil and gas prices continue to rise as Iran holds the Strait of Hormuz in its clutches and restricts traffic in and out of the strait. I think something like 20% of the world's oil supply moves in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. What's interesting is, as I'm recording this, Trump is making a big deal that this waterway, the Strait of Hormuz, is being blockaded and held closed by the Iranian military, which Trump has claimed has been totally obliterated. Now, how is that possible? How could a country whose defenses and their attack capability that has been totally eliminated, how are they able to keep this narrow stretch of waterway from being used? I'll tell you how. It seems to me that we're being lied to by the Trump administration. That the Iranian military's defensive and attack capabilities have not been totally obliterated or significantly degraded. Anyways, so the latest thing as of the recording of this is that J.D. Vance went to Pakistan to negotiate with the Iranians about maintaining a ceasefire that was reached last week. And J.D. Vance left Pakistan after less than a day of negotiating, claiming that he couldn't reach a deal with the Iranians. The Iranians, in response to this failure to reach a negotiated peace deal in and around the ceasefire, said that they are going to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. In response to this, Trump then said, well, we're going to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. So now we have this at least rhetorical standoff happening around the Strait of Hormuz, which has sent oil prices skyrocketing again, and I am sure is going to drive down the stock market. Now, don't be surprised if in a couple of days there's some big announcement once again that on Trump's side that some kind of deal has been reached, which will send oil prices soaring again and the stock market shooting up again. So this all seems like a gigantic ploy to make money, if you ask me. The other thing that has happened recently in the last 2 weeks is that Trump and Pete Hegseth, who I like to call Pete Kegsbreath, they are going to, come December 2026, start automatically registering males for the Selective Service or the draft. And why are they doing this? I think they are planning on a bigger conflict in the Middle East. I think they are planning on more global conflicts. And they know that we're going to need soldiers to enlist in the army, airmen to enlist in the Air Force, sailors to enlist in the Navy, and so on. And that they think they're going to end up needing to rely on the draft. Of course, right now, women are not forced to register for the Selective Service. So this will just impact young men of military enlistment age. So I don't think this looks good. Up until this point, we've been able to rely on a totally voluntary registration system for the Selective Service in the draft. But now Trump and Kegsbreath are changing that system to force people. So you tell me what you think, if this is good or you support this. I'd love to know. I sure as hell don't. As a former Army soldier and veteran, I am pretty much against elective and selective wars. I think the only wars we should be fighting in are those that directly impact our own existential situation as a country, or other people are being so adversely impacted by the actions of other nations, like the Jews who were being slaughtered by Nazi Germany in World War II, that we have no other choice but to intervene. Yes, we were slow to get involved in that war, and we should have gotten involved earlier and saved more lives, but we did eventually get involved. And I think that is a morally just type of war. And I do think some wars are worth fighting. This type of conflict that we're seeing in Iran and the manipulation of the oil market and the stock market by these anonymous investors out there tells me something is fishy. Can you imagine being so fucking depraved that you're willing to start a war with another country just so you can manipulate oil and stock markets to make yourself and your friends richer? The only thing more depraved than that would be starting a war to distract from evidence and allegations that you are a pedophile and a rapist. Now, I'm not saying anybody in the Trump administration is doing any of those things. Other people have speculated about it. We still don't have all of the Epstein files released, so who knows? Also, last week, Melania Trump made that really bizarre announcement during an impromptu press conference where she announced to the world that she had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I did not know him. Donald and I knew him from parties. We were at the same parties. You heard her. That's what she said. But nobody asked her. She just called a press conference to deny to the whole world that she knew Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in any meaningful way. Now, there are documents in the Epstein files, like emails between Melania Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell that imply maybe they did know each other better. But I don't know. I'm just telling you what I've seen reported in the news. So, all right. That's our Fate of the Nation report for this week. Those are my thoughts on what's going on. All right. To other important news in my life. Since the last podcast episode I've done, I've been able to confirm that my 30 goldfish that are living in my swimming pool all appear to have survived the winter. I have no idea how these fucking fish managed to survive the incredibly frigid temperatures, a pool that was almost frozen solid, and seemed to be happy as clams. They're just out there swimming around, living their best lives. Now, this puts me in somewhat of a moral dilemma. My daughter and I, Space Unicorn, we went and bought these fish almost a year ago, at the end of April or at the beginning of May of 2025, and threw them into the swimming pool, which we're not using. It's an above-ground pool, so that they would eat all of the mosquito larvae. Well, I thought these fucking fish would die after a year, but they haven't. I mean, I didn't think they would survive the winter. I thought they would freeze to death and die. And I would just get a few more feeder goldfish to throw in there in the spring. Well, that's not the case. They're all alive. These fish have grown to monstrous proportions. They're about the size now of television remote controls. And they swim around in these packs. They're like little golden piranhas. A bunch of them have changed colors. I think they've gone feral. I don't dare go into this pool for fear of being eaten alive by these goldfish. But now I have a moral dilemma. I have to take care of these fucking things. They're like pets. I have an obligation to them. Now, I think it's illegal to take goldfish and release them in lakes and rivers. Not that I've contemplated that. But I don't know what to do with these fish. I don't know if I can just leave them in there and see what happens. How much bigger they're going to get. I mean, it's a huge pool. It's a 13,000 gallon above ground pool. And these little feeder goldfish came out of a 10-gallon aquarium at a Petco. So these fuckers are in there living their best lives. They seem happy. They seem healthy. So I guess I just leave them. You know, maybe until it's an old pool, so maybe until it breaks or collapses or whatever. I mean, at that point, I guess if that happens, I can conduct an emergency rescue operation. So I'm trying to figure this out. I don't know what to do with these fucking goldfish. But if the pool does collapse and breaks or something, then, you know, we have a tragedy on our hands. Potentially 30 dead goldfish. You know, they're living beings. Like I said before, they've sort of become pets. They're not the pets I wanted. Not the pets I imagined I would have for myself. But there they are. Maybe we get the pets we deserve. Not the pets we want. Maybe 30 half-feral swimming pool goldfish are the pets I deserve for some reason. I don't know what that says about me, if anything. So anyways, that's what's going on with me. That's the big moral conundrum of my life. Now, I said it would be a tragedy if the pool broke open and my swimming pool goldfish spilled out across the yard and died. In terms of the types of tragedies that have impacted human beings over history, it's a pretty small one, I think. I think we'll agree on that. 30 dead goldfish don't compare to some of the biggest human tragedies, which I was doing a little research, and about this time of year, about April, and I sort of stumbled into a discovery that mid to late April, historically, has been a time where lots of human tragedies have occurred. So I'm going to read some of those to you. I'm going to tell you about some of them. There's a pretty long list of these things, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time going into great depth about each one, because I'm not a historian and I don't know a lot of details about these individual tragedies. But I think it is notable to point out some of these things, and that sort of from a historical perspective, we are in a precarious time of the year. So let's go through some of these. April 14th, 1865. President Abraham Lincoln was shot at the Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth. And on the following day, April 15th, President Lincoln died. Now that's pretty awful. We all know about good old Honest Abe getting assassinated. Terrible, terrible stuff. All right, April 14th, 1935. We had what's known as the Black Sunday dust storm during the Great Dust Bowl, which was a massive environmental disaster in the U.S. Great Plains, where I think thousands upon thousands of people starved to death when the agricultural industry collapsed. And that's what the classic book, The Grapes of Wrath, is about. Is the Great Dust Bowl. And then let's see, we're going to jump way ahead in time here. I'd asked for these to be in chronological order, but they're not, apparently, and I'm not going to reorder them for you. In April 14th, 1994, so we're going to jump ahead now, 60 years. 2 U.S. Black Hawk helicopters were mistakenly shot down over Iraq, killing 26 people. You may have seen the movie Black Hawk Down. Well, that's what that movie's about, that incident. And I remember this. I was actually serving in the military at the time. That was a pretty horrible incident, if I remember correctly. But if you want to know more about that, you can go watch the movie. And by the way, I think the movies have been made of almost all of these disasters, movies or books. So if you're interested in a particular disaster I'm talking about, you could probably find a book or a movie about it. Let's see. Going back in time again, April 15th, 1912. You should know this. Let me pause for a minute, see if you know what happened on April 15th, 1912. The RMS Titanic sank in the North Atlantic after hitting an iceberg on April 14th. Now, we've all seen the movie Titanic, I bet. Well, 1,500 people died in that accident. Horrible, horrible, horrible stuff. Great movie, though. James Cameron's Titanic. Love that movie. Okay, jumping back ahead in time. I've never heard of this one. April 15th, 1989, the Hillsborough Stadium disaster occurred in England, resulting in a crush that killed 97 football fans. Yeah, those fucking Europeans and their soccer games. I'm not going to call it football. I'm going to call it soccer. They're always rioting, fighting, crushing each other. But 97 people dead in a single soccer game, that's awful. Let's see, jumping ahead to the 2010s, April 15th, 2013, the Boston Marathon bombing occurred, killing 3 people and injuring over 260. I remember that one too. That was awful. I'm pretty sure they made a movie about that too. Let's see, April 16th, 1947. I have not heard of this one. The Texas City explosion, which was a massive industrial accident involving a cargo ship that killed nearly 600 people. Jesus fucking Christ. That's crazy. First of all, so a bunch of people on land must have died because I don't think a cargo ship holds 600 people, but maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. Again, jumping back up to the 2000s, April 16th, 2007, the Virginia Tech shooting occurred. The mass shooting where 32 people were killed by a gunman at Virginia Tech. I remember this one. How fucking awful. And I'll say, I think there are a number of mass shootings on this list, and it's just a fucking shame that we've not managed to do better when it comes to addressing the problem of gun violence in the United States and limiting access to military-grade assault weapons to people. We've just got to do better. And it fucking blows my mind that we haven't done better after the oceans of blood that have been spilled in mass killings in the United States. But that's a different podcast, I guess. Let's see, April 17th, 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion began, which was a failed operation by the CIA to overthrow Fidel Castro. That didn't go well. And now Donald Trump in 2026 is talking about taking over Cuba. Let's see, April 17th, 2013, a fertilizer plant explosion in West Texas killed 15 people. April 18th, 1906, the San Francisco earthquake and the fires that happened after it wiped out most of San Francisco and killed somewhere between 700 to 3,000 people. That's a crazy span of potential deaths. I don't know how they don't know that with more fidelity, but maybe they just didn't keep good records back then. And I think there was probably a lot of undocumented immigration going on the West Coast and in California at the time. So it's entirely possible they really don't know how many people died. And, there weren't things like modern building codes or occupancy requirements. So it's possible, you had a bunch of people, again, if some of them were undocumented, living in, shitty tenement buildings all over the city or whatever that burned down. Maybe they really don't know. I could see that. Let's see, April 18th, 1983. There was a suicide bombing at the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, Lebanon, that killed 63 people. I would have been 9 at the time, and I do remember that happening. April 19th, 1993, The 51-day Waco siege ended when the Branch Davidian compound burned down, killing 76 people. And that compound and that cult, the Branch Davidians, was led by a guy named David Koresh. I remember that too. I was serving in the army in South Korea when that happened. I remember listening to it on the radio, actually. Let's see. Another horrible attack, April on domestic soil. April 19th, 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing that destroyed the Murrah Federal Building, killing 168 people. Yep, I remember that too when it happened. I remember where I was when I first learned about it and saw it. I was attending college at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and I remember walking into the cafeteria, which was called the Blue Wall, and there was a big TV that used to sit there and play stuff, and it happened to be playing the news, and I remember seeing the federal building being blown to shit. But they did catch the guy who did that and execute him. Let's see, another horrible, horrible mass shooting, April 20th, 1999, the Columbine High School massacre. That was done by these two shooters who killed 13 people. Again, another truly awful mass shooting. And it's the first one I remember watching sort of as it was unfolding on the internet. I know where I was for this. I was at work, one of my very first jobs out of college, and I remember sitting there watching this on the internet, being absolutely horrified. Let's see, April 20th, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, and it killed 11 workers and caused a gigantic oil spill. I think there was a movie made about that too, starring Mark Wahlberg, if I remember correctly. I haven't seen it, but I've heard it was good. Okay, going back in time, April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine exploded, causing probably the worst nuclear disaster in history, if you don't count Fukushima. But if you want to see and learn more about the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster, watch the HBO series, Chernobyl. It is one of the best fucking TV shows I have ever seen. And it really helps you appreciate how brave human beings can be when it comes to sacrificing themselves for their fellow human beings. The stuff that the Russians did to deal with that disaster is just absolutely mind-blowing and will leave you in awe. And as a dramatic series, the show Chernobyl on HBO, the drama, the dread, I've never seen anything like it. It's absolutely amazing. Definitely worth checking out. Let's see, in our last horrible disaster that happened in April was April 27th, 1979. A shooter opened fire at the Battle of Flowers parade in San Antonio, Texas, killing 2 people and wounding 51. So, yeah, there you have it. April, the middle to end of April. It's a horrible, horrible time. And let's hope, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm hoping that we get through this April of 2026, without any horrible human tragedies. And that's just a pared down list. There are many more tragedies that happened in April. But that'll give you a taste. Not that we want to taste, right? We don't want to taste and certainly not enjoy human tragedy. But part of what I want to do here, my dear listeners, is just alert you to the fact that historically, April, mid to late April, is a very dangerous time for human beings. So be careful. All right. Let's see some other updates, some other things I've been up to. I've seen a bunch of concerts recently. Let's see, on April 4th, Stomping Jen and I went to go see a show by this guy named Mike Doughty, who was the lead singer from a band called Soul Coughing. And he played a very small, stripped-down show in this local venue in Amherst, Massachusetts called the Drake. And it was just him and this guitarist, a guy named Andrew Scrap Livingston. And we saw, Stomping Jen and I, we saw Soul Coughing back in the summer, I believe, of 2025. And I much preferred Mike Doughty sort of alone, just with this one guitarist who, in some ways, his playing reminded me of The Edge from U2, crossed with like a country guitarist. It was there's like a lot of chorus and echo effects on the guitar. It was very like spacey sounding, but also very grounded. I don't know how to describe it really, except for the way that I just did. So it was sort of like The Edge crossed with a country guitar player or something. I don't know. But it was a really good show. Very enjoyable. And my favorite part was there were seats to sit in. I didn't have to stand. I hate concerts where I have to stand. They're the worst. Let's see. Then on April 10th, which is just this past weekend, before I'm recording this, Stomping Jen and I went with our friend Shivering Jim to see the band Puscifer. Now, Puscifer is... The singer of Puscifer is this guy named Maynard James Keenan, and he's the lead singer of a band called Tool. Now, all you Tool fans are going to be like, yeah, I know that. Everyone knows who Maynard is. Well, not everybody does know who Maynard is, you fucks. So I wanted to describe it. Anyways, they had a guy open for him named Dave Hill, who describes himself as a comedian and musician, which he was. The opening act was Dave Hill, was funny, entertaining, and then the main show came out, Puscifer. And so I told you, that has Maynard James Keenan in it, a guy named Matt Mitchell, who he writes most of the music, plays keyboards and plays guitar. Then there's this woman singer named Karina Round. I think she writes a lot of the music too. And on bass, there's this guy named Josh Moreau. And on drums, this guy named Gunnar Olsen. Now, we were, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 feet back from the stage. And this drummer, this Gunnar Olsen guy, hits those drums so hard, you could feel it in your guts. He was absolutely amazing. He was my favorite part of the show. So this concert was supporting Puscifer's latest album, which is called Normal Isn't. And, you know, the music was okay, sort of so-so. If you're a Puscifer fan, you know, no surprises in what you get from a Puscifer concert and from the Puscifer music. Kind of all sounds the same, sort of. So it's very much in the vein of their past style and compositions, but it was very good. It was very enjoyable. And again, where we were seated, we didn't have to stand, which I found very delightful. At least initially. I was like, oh great, we don't have to stand. But then I started feeling like, okay, this is kind of lame, because it was a rock concert and I wanted to stand, but all the people behind me were sitting and I felt kind of bad. So it's like I wanted to get up and move, but I couldn't, because I'm always very concerned about in person offending people and upsetting people, and I didn't want to offend or upset the people behind me who were choosing to sit. So it was kind of a conundrum. Anyways, and that show was, the Puscifer show was at Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut, which was a pretty good venue, I think, to see the show. And Stomping Jen and I stayed the night there because it's far. It's like an hour and 45 minutes from our house. So we stayed the night. And I have to say, I'm not a big gambler, so we didn't gamble. We didn't even hang out in the casino very much. But I will say Foxwoods Hotel had the best hotel bathroom shower I've ever seen. It was perfect. Not too big so you get cold, very high quality materials, amazing water pressure, and we were on the 23rd floor. Everything was clean, it looked like new, no mold. It was great. I wish I could have stayed there a couple of more nights and taken a few more showers there. I love showering. Showering is the best, especially a nice hot shower. I don't like cold plunges. Fuck cold plunges. No cold plunging. Hot showers only. Okay. And let's see. Some movies to tell you about and recommend to you. Let's see. Stomping Jen and I went to go see the movie The Drama, which is getting kind of trashed by reviewers. So it has Zendaya in it, Robert Pattinson, who is Batman, and a bunch of other people. I don't know who they were. But it's like a story, I'm going to tell you without spoilers, it's a story about this engaged couple, so Zendaya and Robert Pattinson's characters, sort of like a week or so before they're about to get married, they're playing this game with their friends where they each say the worst thing they've ever done. And everybody goes around and says the worst thing they've done, and it's all kind of like silly and lighthearted. You know, one guy they think he's going to reveal that he fucked a dog, but that's not what happens. But anyways, they get to Zendaya's character, and she says the worst thing she's ever done. And that's sort of where the movie kind of jumps off and goes into really wild, crazy storytelling. And, you know, I don't want to give any more spoilers, but I loved the movie. I thought it was really, really well done. I thought it asked a lot of interesting and important questions. Like, are people defined by the worst things they've ever done? If you think about doing a bad thing and don't actually do it, is it as bad as doing the bad thing? Right? Like, these are the kinds of questions the movie explores. Right? Also, like, what does it mean to love a person? You know, when you get married, a lot of people make a commitment to love a person, in good times and bad, for better or for worse. And what happens when you are confronted with the worst? What happens when you're confronted with the worst a week before you're supposed to get married? Do you give up on that person? Do you walk away from them? Do you work through it? What does it say about you and how you respond to those things, right? So these are the questions this movie is asking, in my opinion, and I thought it was very well done. I don't get all the hate for it. This is probably why I'm not a movie critic. I love mostly everything that I see. Let's see, we saw another movie recently. We watched this one on streaming. I don't know what channel, but it was called Sirat. And it's about an old man and his son who are off looking for the old man's daughter and the son's sister in Morocco at a rave. And they think she might be at this rave because she was super into the rave culture and she disappeared. And so the story picks up with the old man and the son. They're at this rave looking for the daughter, and the military shows up basically and says there's some disaster happening. And we later learn that World War III is starting and the military is trying to evacuate everybody. But this one group of ravers breaks off and takes off into the desert, and the old man and the son follow them. And that's sort of where the movie gets going. And I don't want to say much more about it, except that it is one of the best movies I've seen in the last 2 years. It was so good. So captivating. Highly recommend it. It's called Sirat. Let's see, another movie I've seen, it's called S4, the Bob Lazar Story. I rented this on Amazon. And it's about this guy who claims to have worked at Area 51 on a recovered flying saucer reverse engineering program for the federal government. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you know that I'm super into the topic of UFOs, or UAP as they call them now. And I happen to believe that the U.S. government knows a lot more about UAPs than they are telling us, that there is sufficient evidence and documentation to show that they are in possession of a number of crafts that did not originate on this planet, that were likely built by what they call non-human intelligences, or NHIs. And this movie, S4, the Bob Lazar Story, tells Bob Lazar's account of working at a facility that was actively working to reverse engineer and understand alien or non-human intelligence spacecraft. It's very well done. They effectively recreate everything that Bob Lazar says that he saw from his memory by using 3D modeling. And I thought it was very, very well done. And you don't have to be a UFO or UAP nut to appreciate it. It's a good story, and the people who made the movie, present some new evidence to back up Bob Lazar's claims. So it's worth checking out. And finally, the last thing I want to tell you is I went to go see Project Hail Mary again, which I absolutely loved a third time. I went to go see it on Sunday at 11 a.m. The theater was packed. The people, again, were laughing, crying. I just think audiences love Rocky the Alien. I did a whole episode on Project Hail Mary, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore now. except to say again, I love that movie. And if you haven't seen it, go see it in the theater. Go see it on the biggest screen you can. Okay? All right. That's it. That's the show for you folks. I know it's been 2 weeks since the last one. I hope it was worth the wait. I'd love to hear from you. So please follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram. I even have a Substack account you can follow. I occasionally write stuff and publish it there. I have the idea for a new story or poem that I'm working on. It came from a song, actually, by Phoebe Bridgers. The song that she has called Funeral. So I'm working on that. Hopefully I'll have it published on Substack at some point, and I tend to like to read my poems or stories here on the podcast when they're finished. But I don't have a prediction for how long this one's going to take. Let's see. Yeah, so subscribe to us on all the socials, please. Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue Sky. We're even on TikTok. Send me some feedback. I love to hear from you. I love to hear when you think the show was good. It helps. Again, since we don't get money for this, it's good to hear from you. It's good to know you're listening. Send me an email, softservepodcast@gmail.com. You can send me a DM through any of the messaging platforms. Whatever you want. Okay, and again, remember, we're going to be on an every 2-week schedule. So we'll be back again in 2 weeks. Maybe I'll have a guest with me. Maybe I'll have a stomping Jen. I don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen. It's probably just going to be me again, all by myself. That's what I do. I sit here by myself. And now I just stare at this computer screen and I talk. Sometimes I don't even know what words are coming out of my mouth. It amazes me. And often when I listen back to these podcasts, I'm like, how did I say all of that stuff? So there you go. 2 weeks. We'll be back at it again. And I hope you have a good 2 weeks. I hope we still have a planet in 2 weeks. And until then, I leave you, my dear, dear listeners, with my salutation. A salutation goodbye? I don't even know. Hold on, let's Google that. Salutation. No, that's a greeting. A gesture or utterance made as a greeting or acknowledgement of another's arrival or departure. Oh, okay. I guess a salutation can be a departure, can be a saying. Okay, well, in that case, let's rewind, shall we? I say to you all now, the thing I say at the end of every episode, my salutation that I am known for, my saying, my slogan, my words of departure, which are always and truly, bye now.
This world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road.